Welcome, listeners, to a new episode of Reach Podcasts. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about women and females on the spectrum.
Yeah. Um, I myself, so my name is Michelle Zeman, and I happen to be a female on the autism spectrum myself. So I have grown up, and that being said, I was also diagnosed when I was very young, which is not so much like a lot of females on the autism spectrum.
And why is that? Why do females tend to not get diagnosed as much? So statistically, uh, it tends to be four times more boys get diagnosed than women. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that is correct. And, the thing is that 4-to-1 ratio really goes against females. And the thing is with that too, um, this is just my take. This is my hot take on this, but I think females tend to be either misdiagnosed or diagnosed later because, you know how we talked about in the last episode, we talked about masking. That's a
Right.
that's a really big thing that females do. They do tend to sort of mask and sort of try to um mold themselves almost as if they want to be put in this societal box. I can even relate to that even though I was diagnosed so young. I remember wanting to be exactly like my other neurotypical peers, wanting to fit in with them, um wanting them to like me. So I would try to change things about myself and even behaviors about myself to almost like match their likes and dislikes and all of that. I think that that's a very common thing that does happen with females on the
Now,
spectrum. So
regarding your peers, did they have a tendency to be more accepting, or did they point anything out that were different?
Unfortunately, in my case, I was sort of a standout in the sense that I would almost try too hard. I would, for example, if I knew that somebody liked something, I would not just say it once, but I would almost perseverate, meaning, I would talk about it again and again in the hopes that they would think I'm being funny or in the hopes that I'm being, a little bit on the quirkier side, having fun, So, unfortunately, a lot of that came with a lot of bullying because it sounded like I was more or less obsessed. And so because I wanted to be like them, I would almost find out as much information as possible and, just try to like spread that information everywhere and, just bask in this like knowledge, so I would almost end up actually doing myself a disservice by changing my mold to almost being in this box of I have to be like my peers. I have to have them like me. Um and that's really something that females do go through. Females go through a lot of bullying, especially females like on the spectrum go through a lot of bullying because of that, Because again, we want to be liked, we want to be accepted. We want people to fall in love with us or, be our friends and stuff, but because it might be overboard or we might have masked so much that just a little bit of that tape has come apart, then we set ourselves up at a target. And that's not okay, but unfortunately it does happen.
Now, when that did unravel, did that cause any meltdowns, or did it cause any like like social anxiety, stress growing up?
Absolutely. I would actually like start breaking down and crying, in classes and I would go to my teachers. I would try to explain as best as I could, but it was really hard because even though I was diagnosed at a young age and I was able to communicate, my feelings and stuff by the time I was a little bit older, it still hurt. It was still hard to communicate and it was still hard to even just like portray exactly how I felt in those moments. Um, a lot of the breaking down would happen actually at home because of the fact that at school, I almost felt like, again, even though I had to fit in with my peers, not only did I have that target, I also had to fit in just with societal norms of the sense that I have to follow the rules at school. And if I'm going to be a successful student, then I can't just have meltdowns. I can't just cry. I have to hide it all in. So it was almost like at school, for me, I had to sort of like envelope myself up until I got home. And that's when that envelope would just rip open, you know?
So, was there any particular like age range where this was the worst?
Oh, absolutely. I remember, around like fifth or sixth grade, that was when I actually started puberty. And that was when like my body was changing. That was when things were happening and I didn't understand it. And so I not only had, the barrier of being bullied, but I also had gone through this very challenging part of my life where I had no idea what was happening. And to parents out there, it's really important to be very patient with your female daughters that are going through puberty, that have autism, because it is a very scary time. We have absolutely no idea. And because of puberty and because of, um, all the hormones and stuff that are happening too, that are changing and that are increasing, it does attribute to more meltdowns. I remember that being a very, very big issue, especially when I first went through puberty. So I felt like that age range was definitely the most difficult because, I was going through this very enormous change in my life, but then at the same time, um I was going through just being bullied by peers because I wasn't like them. I would try to mask so hard, but then I would also end up doing it so hard that it ended up actually biting me rather than appeasing to them.
And you think that masking could, might contribute to the lack of diagnoses for?
Absolutely. I think that masking absolutely does, females on the spectrum do tend to sort of like try to mimic their peers, So if there's a popular peer at school who really likes this one type of music, even if, like, for example, I know that pop music was really popular when I was younger. And at the time, I didn't really care for pop music. So I was like, okay, like if I'm going to be friends with them, I'm going to try this. There were certain hard lines that I wouldn't go towards, but I would really try to pick out almost like traits from other peers to see what they were really into in order for me to sort of like center and shape myself to be like them so that way they could like me and I could get their friendship in the end.
For me, I masked really hard, but in a different way, where I literally put myself so far deep inside myself where I didn't show my true self, my true feelings to anybody. And if I did get bullied, I was totally ignorant of facts. So looking back, there was plenty of bullying. I just wasn't aware of what people were doing to me.
I grew up also not really knowing certain social cues and certain like social language. Like for example, peers would use like metaphors that were derogatory, but I didn't know it at the time. And so I was like, oh, is this what this means? And then, I sort of started to read a little bit more and then I realized, okay, I'm not appeasing to them. So that's how, like, for me, those meltdowns really happen. When you were going through all of that too, was it kind of similar in the sense of like, these peers were using certain like body language or
Uh,
metaphors?
no, like because I was a family of three boys. We all had the same backpack, so our names were written on them. So people
Hmm.
would call my name randomly. Didn't know why. I was oblivious. I admit it. Not only was I not aware of what people were doing or their intent, because I wasn't able to read intent at all back then, and I'm a big proponent for dramatic arts and theater to help alleviate that for people. Um, the other aspect of it that I didn't understand was who to report it to, depending on the situation, because it's not always clear who is an authority figure to report to, how to report it. Like I had instances on buses, I had no idea as a kid that you could report it to the bus driver. To be honest, as a kid, I always thought the bus driver was just an angry person who drove a bus. To get picked on a bus and not be able to know who to report it to was um, a minor issue I had in high school. In elementary school, there was a kid that used to poke me in the back, but that one my mom got involved, so that
Yeah.
stopped that way. It's sometimes it's if the parents know, but as you get older into middle school and high school, it's more you're supposed to take care of yourself and address the issues the best possible way you can. But if you don't know how, then you're kind of stuck.
And it's
Uh,
interesting. Yeah, it's
As we're in a
interesting.
society where like, okay, like for a guy, it's oh, you should defend yourself, but you get defend yourself, you get in trouble. So you're stuck in this logic loop of I can't defend myself, but I'm supposed to defend myself, but I can't defend myself, but I'm supposed to defend myself, and then you just get stuck.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And from a female perspective, it's almost like you have to almost like just take it. And that's not okay either, I I can even remember, and again, like this is going to be a whole episode in of itself, bullying in general, but
Oh, I agree. But stay tuned for
yeah,
our next episode.
yes, for sure, for sure. For females, it's definitely a lot harder because a lot of the things that, females tend to face issues with is, reading those social cues and reading what's truly bullying versus teasing. And, I see that within myself. I see that within some of the female clients that I've worked with. I've seen this with other autistic females or females on the spectrum, so I see it from all different points of view. Um, and when you have that, when you have, any other factor that's going on too, like it doesn't have to be just bullying, but even just like things going on at home or your body changing or your life changing for some reason, you know, um, from a female perspective, it's definitely a lot harder to decipher exactly what is happening and why it's happening. And so I feel like, unfortunately, that's something that we, as a female on the spectrum, have to battle on a daily basis.
Yeah. Question for you.
Yeah.
What advice do you wish you had or guidance you had growing up?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I wish that someone would have told me that there are people out there that can do wrong and that not everyone is a good person. I remember trying to even do something as simple as like buy my friendship from people. For example, when I was growing up, I had a person in middle school that in exchange for his friendship, I would help him out with homework. And it was like, wait a minute, I shouldn't be doing this. Like back then, I wish someone had given me those social skills and some of those like guidances. Cause in a way, that is considered bullying too. Because you are ultimately doing this thing for them to benefit them and them only in the hopes that they would give you any sort of friendship. And that friendship wasn't even true. It was just a very conditional friendship. It was only if I did this for this person. Um,
Quid quo pro for kids.
exactly, exactly. And that's not okay,
No,
so
we're a global demographic, unfortunately,
it,
and yeah,
yeah,
we
it,
are very prone to being exploited for things like that or worse.
exactly, exactly, and unfortunately, you know, it the exploitation is very, very real. And you mentioned a little earlier about how like you didn't know who you could report to. I mean, I knew that I could talk to like my mom, but even aside from that, if I were to talk to my mom and she would talk to a school administrator, that could even that could even like make things worse, so
Yeah,
it's like
because
at
as
that
it
point.
goes down the social line.
Yeah, because it's a social stigma essentially. Especially as you're trying to, fit into this society, and as you're trying to fit in with, your peers, and as you're trying to get people to like you, if God forbid something happens where, a principal finds out about bullying, unfortunately, the the bullying, or, whoever does you wrong, actually they end up getting more power rather than the person who reported it. And that's a very scary thing to think about.
Yeah, it's all those extra consequences. And the other aspect of this, like for me growing up, by the time I was in middle school or high school, my parents weren't ones I wanted to report to either.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. I mean, I would keep everything in because I felt like I was the safest person. And I also remember too, like with relation to like social skills and stuff. So, I'm a very loud person. I'm a very like vocal person in the sense that my voice can carry, um, pretty loudly. And I remember I was talking to a friend about an instance of, like somebody talking negatively about me, and a teacher overheard me. And at that point, I had to report it because she had approached me and asked me about it. And it was like, oh crud, what am I gonna do? And again, that social consequence happens. Um,
Yeah, or you mask through it and it gets shoved under the radar.
Yeah, and that turns into anxiety, it turns into depression. It's something that, unfortunately, as a female, on the spectrum, I deal with anxiety and depression on a daily basis because of the fact that I have to present myself in this very professional manner. I have to present myself as this strong and powerful female who can handle anything and everything that gets thrown at her. I don't get to, like in my case, even if I feel like I'm ready to just break down and cry because of everything that's happening,
Hmm.
I am not allowed to, because if I do, I'm the negative one. I'm the one who's going to lose their job. I'm the one who's going to lose, in the end. And unfortunately, a lot of females on the spectrum end up going through something very similar because they do have to mask for so long. They do have to put on this professional, happy, smiley face. And God forbid if they have a meltdown, or if something happens that, triggers something, they end up getting punished for it. And that's not okay either.
Yep. And for
So
me, I had to be the perfect child. So no mistakes, no getting in trouble. So that's why I would avoid fights, even if I was getting picked on. It was to stay low under the radar as I could to survive. And
wow.
at the same time, being psychologically damaging over time.
Yeah, it really can be very psychologically damaging. And, for the parents who are listening to this, what I really want to bring forward is really just pay attention, pay attention to certain things that are going on, especially when it comes to the different changes and the different things that are happening, because if your child is presenting, with like these signs of masking, or these signs of like feeling like they're going to just bust, there is a reason. There's always a rhyme and a reason behind it. And it's really
And
important to take that look.
I would also argue if you see increased need of stimming, then there's definitely something wrong.
Absolutely. I can agree 1,000% with that, especially as somebody who will stim as a way to unmask away from the world. I will have full blown conversations with myself and start like flapping my hands at times because I feel like I need to unmask.
Yeah,
And
and to physically release all that anxiety.
yeah, physical releases in general is something that, a lot of people a lot of people on the spectrum do. And, especially if you see like this increase of this happening, it's really important to take note of what's going on. Why do you think this is happening? I myself, even though I'm a female on the spectrum, One of the things that I do is I speak with parents about, what potential things have happened. Why do you think this is happening? And it's because, they present the concerns to me and I have to think about it from all different angles. And being a female and having been not necessarily in their exact shoes, but kind of knowing certain things about what it's like to be on the spectrum. Um, from that perspective, I always like come in with, well, do you think this happened? What do you think about this? So, I'm thinking about different potential events that may have happened too that may increase that. All right. Well, thank you everybody for hanging out with us on this episode. If you want more information about masking, please check out our previous episode. And if you want to learn more about bullying, that will actually be our next episode. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.